My name is Lori Power. My company is MP Benefits, and I'm a group benefit consultant. My job with companies is to make sure that their employee group benefit plan aligns with their corporate culture and their compensation strategy. When we achieve that, we can achieve amazing things for attraction and retention of your best asset, which is your employee. I met Michael first off last year when I reached out to him with regards to humor in the workplace. And we had I transformed my whole existence, actually realizing I didn't have to be so serious all the time, that I could smile. Maybe not, Jordan, when I'm giving a 30% increase on the renewal, it's not really appropriate to chuckle and go, oh, do you see that coming through? But it's certainly applying humor and understanding the vulnerability of that, I really do attribute to Michael. For those that haven't read any of his books, this one sits on my desk all the time. I know the Jerk-Free Workplace is really phenomenal because we don't have to be jerks at work. However, this one really does relate to my day-to-day, how to inspire, hire, inspire, and fuel their fire. I love this book. So easy read, but certainly one that stays on my desk.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Why don't you take just a moment and I'll take a breath and you can introduce yourself and what makes Michael Michael.
What makes Michael? Oh my God, scientists have been studying that for years, Lori. It's great to see everyone. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I'm honored to be here. So if you go back 25 years ago, I was a senior manager in how I would affectionately describe a soul-sucking, fun-sucking organization. It was draining the life out of me. I couldn't believe the workplace culture. It was just very dysfunctional, and we would probably use the word toxic today. And so I decided at that time, speaking of the topic today, purpose, to make it my purpose, to make it my mission, to stay alive and to enjoy life better, and to create my business where I began a speaking, training, writing career. I've been doing it for 25 years now, traveling the world, researching, writing, and speaking about inspiring workplace cultures, because I have this fundamental belief that work has a huge impact on our lives. It affects our marriages, our family lives. It affects our mental and physical health, our identity, our sense of purpose. It gives us structure and meaning. It affects where we live. I mean, how else can you explain North Dakota, for goodness sakes? And it's a huge bit of a time sucker. It's the single biggest use of our waking hours in this short thing called life. So I think we owe it to the people that we're working with. We owe it to our employees, to our customers, to our teammates, to our souls, to create as positive, as inspiring workplace as possible, because work matters. And this may sound cheesy, but I honestly believe, in fact, I wrote a blog about this a few weeks ago. If you want to create a better world, it's not a bad place to start by creating better workplaces, because the unit of the workplace has such a fundamental impact on so many things, on people's happiness, on our communities, on the environment. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, and we shouldn't have to choose between a happy work life and a happy life in general. You can, like, when you love what you do, everything else follows. I had a wonderful experience on the weekend up at the lake. There was one of our neighbors was going over to another neighbor, and they had this big package. I'm like, what's going on? They're like, well, it's Peter's birthday. Now, mind you, they got the date wrong, but we were like, Peter's birthday. So then we started a little convoy, and we were all going over to Peter's house. And I said, now this is going to sound like I'm blowing smoke. I truly thought the man was around 78 years old, right? Lives alone, immaculate house, constantly busy. I said, how old are you today, Peter? He's, well, my birthday's next week, but thanks for the advance. He said, but I'm 92. I went, wow. Yeah, exactly. I went, what? So then that leads to a great opportunity for a conversation. Peter, what's the secret, dude? Because you're rocking it. Like you are fit, you're healthy, you're happy. He's like, I'm absolutely all of those things. And my dad told me hard work would never kill me. So my work and my life combine. And he said the purpose thing. He didn't even know I was talking to you, Michael.
That's awesome. I love that, Lori. And there's more and more research that suggests when we have a stronger sense of purpose in our work, in our lives, it helps us be more, not just happier, but more resilient, healthier, physically healthier, not just mentally healthier, but physically healthier, and that we do live longer, that people who have a strong sense of purpose tend to live longer. I was on vacation, I don't know, before the pandemic, so 3 years ago, let's say, in Costa Rica, and I stumbled upon this, it was a business magazine, but the entire magazine was dedicated to the study of purpose in business and work. And I was so impressed that they had this whole issue talking about purpose. And there were so many references to the impact of purpose on helping people live long, healthy lives.
Well, what first attracted me to doing this subject with you, Michael, was when you had put out a blog and you were citing the Harvard Business Review, and you were citing some of their studies on how, aligning that purpose. Now, when we're talking about purpose, though, sometimes it can get convoluted with our vision, with our goals, with our mission. How do we, is there a difference? Let's start there. Is there a difference, or do they all blend into one another?
I think they do all blend in with one another. They all feed off of one another. I mean, my hope is that in any workplace, in any team, even, that we have an inspiring vision, an inspiring mission of what it is we're trying to accomplish, and not one of those, and my goodness, I've seen so many in my work, blah, blah, blah mission statements or vision statements that suck the life out of the room. And they're interchangeable. I remember doing a workshop years ago with a whole bunch of senior leaders like VPs, CEOs, and I had all their vision statements ahead of time. And I put them on a table and I challenged them to go find their own one. And most of them couldn't find them because they were so meaningless. They were so devoid of any passion or energy or connection. So I think we have to bring these to life, but I think they are important. I think it's important that everybody understands what the purpose of their company is, what the purpose of their team is, but also then figure out a way to connect their own job, the own work that we all do day in and day out, that is going to give us a sense of meaning and a sense of purpose. And, you know, I don't know if I quoted some of those references in that blog, Lori, but there are studies that suggest, for example, that 7 out of every 10 team members don't understand what the purpose of their team is. 7 out of 10. As I jokingly say, I live in Canmore, Alberta. We have a wolf pack in the Rockies here of 10 wolves. Wolves have to operate as a team to haul down a big moose or elk in the wintertime. But imagine if 7 out of 10 of those wolves all of a sudden go, squirrel! That leads to a little bit of squirrel brain, and you're not going to be successful. And I think we run the risk of having squirrel brain in our teams if everyone doesn't understand the primary goal we're working on. Inc. magazine had a survey a few years ago that asked CEOs, how many of your employees do you think would understand what your top priorities are? And that feeds into purpose, right? We have to understand why we're doing what we're doing, what really matters at work. So they asked these CEOs. The average answer of all the CEOs was 67% of our employees would know our priorities. Well, then they surveyed the employees. Oops. Turns out the response was closer to 2 to 3% of our employees only knew what the priorities were of the company.
And I thought that 67% was going to be bad. I was going to say, 2
to 3%. So how do we expect people to be working in the same direction and be committed to something? And there's so much that we could talk for hours about this topic, right? Because a sense of purpose gives us a sense of belonging too. I think it's so critical. How do employees have any commitment to an organization, to a team? Why should an employee be curious or loyal about their work, or suggest ideas or look for ways to do things in innovative ways unless they feel connected, a sense of belonging, and a sense of purpose in their job?
Well, and I like what Lisa had said, work and life are not separate boxes. They're absolutely not. And to your point, Patty, blah, 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 right? Like I have walked into businesses where they have done a wonderful thing of putting their purpose or their mission statement or their vision statement on the wall, and I've fallen asleep trying to get to the bottom of that and go, well, who's remembering all of this? But last week, Natasha, you had made mention of how in your work you align that purpose by building activities out. And I think that you would really appreciate this, Michael, because it's an excellent example, and and it's a Natasha original on how you do foster that engagement with your employees. Do you mind unmuting and sharing that out? Now we're all going to steal it, by the way. So it's
yeah. That's okay. You've heard it before. Mike's heard it before. I always profess I'm not recreating the wheel here, and we can only improve by getting ideas from each other, right? So, but this one I did think up in my crazy head. But what I was saying last week was that we have our values on the wall as well, but they're words, right? So what I've done is I've tried to create initiatives or programs around fostering how we can live by those values. And so last week I gave an example. One of our values is innovation. And so I created the Innovation Award, and it's an annual award. It calls out to all employees. Each office gets a big cork board, and everyone gets called out to share their big ideas and their little ideas with us. And so they get the opportunity to write down what their idea is, share with us how they feel it could improve either our services or our workflows, how they would execute on that. And so it really digs deep for them to be innovative and be creative. And then we go through this whole process where we review all of them. We get lots of little ideas as well, which is fantastic that we can implement right away. And I mean, some of them when we first did this a few years ago were little things like, can we decorate our cubicles for Christmas? Yeah, sure. Like, I know, like, of course, like, can we have chamomile tea in the office? Yes, of course you can have that, right? So but then we created a whole award, and we published all of the ideas to the staff. We let them vote on one, and then we picked one, and then we implemented it, and then we relied on the employee to help us with the implementation and execution of that. And so that's just one idea and they got a whole award that was presented to them, like on stage at our annual Christmas party, right? So yeah, so we do a bunch of little things like that, right? Where it just sort of initiatives built around what our values are, right? We have a peer-to-peer program that calls out people for exhibiting our values. Yeah.
Sometimes you get scattered employees that that really, how do you help them, Michael? How do you be that coach that aligns that purpose of what you want to inspire with your staff to suit with their own personality type or their own purpose, so that you can be aligned together? Because there's multiple generations within a workforce, and sometimes that alignment, somebody had said a few weeks ago, it's we're great at onboarding, we're great at attracting and then onboarding, we're good for keeping these employees for a couple of years, but we can't seem to meet them where they are after they've been there a few years. And I think that's perhaps one of the questions that I have is, how do you realign that purpose? How do you reestablish that so that we're all working to common?
Yeah, well, and Natasha spoke to that, I think, partly, right? It's a matter of bringing those values, those words to life. We have to be translators of what those suckers actually mean in terms of our behaviors, our attitudes, day in and day out. We have to bring them to life through stories, and we have to treat them not as just cheesy slogans, but as lines in the sand. So right to Natasha's point, we have to celebrate and recognize employees for living up to our values out loud, and we have to hold employees accountable. In terms of your thoughts there, Laurie, though, I think it speaks to so many things. I talk about the futility of having exit interviews, where the horse has left the proverbial barn, people. You have to have what'll keep you here interviews, and talk to employees on a regular basis and have good, meaningful, rich conversations around what does engage you, what stirs your crank, what will keep you here engaged. I often tell the story of the USS Benfold, where I interviewed the commanding officer of that naval ship, and a really inspiring guy from my book, The Humor Advantage. And he turned that culture around just really through the power of conversations. and asking people simple questions and getting to build trust with them and understand what drives them and what motivates them. And a lot of this circles back to a concept that Yale professor Amy Wrzesniewski talks about, this idea of job crafting, where you can hopefully, when you're working with people, so when you're coaching people, Lori, or talking to them, you can work together to figure out ways that they can maybe subtly shift their job so that it does give them more meaning, more engagement. Sometimes it's even just a language shift that will help engage people more. And then sometimes it's an attitude shift. And a great example that Amy Wrzesniewski shares in her research that I just love is this research from hospitals in the Midwest states, where they looked at custodial staff, cleaners in these hospitals. And at one end of the spectrum, you've got cleaners who would describe their jobs in incredibly boring ways and say, yeah, it's pretty boring. They'd read off the job description and say, anyone can do it. Not terribly engaged employees, right? Probably at risk of losing these folks. At the other end, though, same job, same culture, same level of pay, but a totally different attitude about their work. They would say things like, oh my God, cleanliness in a hospital is incredibly important. I mean, we save lives. And you know what I love about my job is interacting with the patients in the rooms, talking to them for a few moments. When I get the chance, changing the artwork on their walls so that they wake up to a different view every morning. It's a small thing, but it's something I can do, right? Totally different attitude, same job, same culture, same pay, but it's just how they've looked at their work. So we have to help each other. We have to help our employees find those connections. You know,
and get rid of those assumptions and perhaps the judgment, right?
Yeah.
Like to understand you've brought a variety of people together to work because you've hired them for that uniqueness. And Lisa and I have talked a lot about this. So you hire them, you get them, and you do everything you can to get them in the door because they are so unique and you see all the wonderful things that they're going to do for you. And the moment you get them, you stifle them down.
Yeah.
And you try to get them to conform instead of allowing them to live their purpose and share that purpose with the growth of your company.
Right. Yeah. I forget who said this quote, but somebody said, why on earth would we hire smart people and then tell them what to do? We hired smart people for a reason. So if you've got your hiring right, you've got your training and onboarding right, and if people have the right equipment and tools and training to do the jobs, that's when we have to say, okay, you know how to go score. I'll use it. I don't usually use sports metaphors. You know how to score a touchdown, so just go score for us and not get in their way. We do so many things to get in their way. And again, Lori, and you sparked on something in your comments there too, just the simple power of asking that question, hey, what do you think? That simple question engages people with it gives them a sense of purpose. You're showing you respect them, you value their wisdom, you value their experience. What do you think? It helps them be more curious about their job. It helps them be more vested, and again, gives them that sense of belonging and sense of purpose.
And it goes to that feedback and that active conversation. I remember taking a training session a few years ago now on coaching, and the fellow at the front of the room was so modest, right? Like acknowledging the mistakes that he had made early on, which then transformed how he went into the work. But he said, I would go into an organization as the CEO and say, I have an open door policy. Come to me with anything. Then I'd walk into my office and I'd close the door. And, sometimes we mentally close that door.
Yeah.
Sometimes as leaders, we mentally close that door, and to assume that our employees or the people, our teammates, don't feel and see that is an assumption that comes back and makes an ass of us, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We have to remember those old cliche sayings, actions speak louder than words and talk is cheap, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
When we're talking about aligning vision and our purpose, and we get to the why, I do have trouble with the why. I think I could go on all day about the whys. And sometimes I want to add a how and a what and a where and a when.
And a when and a who. And a which.
And create that win-win. What are some things? Because I always say you're preaching to the choir here, but what are some ways that we have seen people make that my new thing is the BFOs, the blinding flashes of the obvious, right? Blinding flashes of obvious. So what have been, when you're working with clients, what has been their BFO? I've renamed that, by the way, but it's not friendly.
BFO. Yeah. I love those acronyms.
Yes.
Okay, I use WTF quite a bit, but in a very different context. I use it in the context of where's the fun, right?
Yeah.
So help me understand your question, Lori. You're just asking.
We often, when we're talking to clients or we're talking to employees, but most especially when you're talking to the leadership, they always want to align that return on investment, right? Or they'll start down that path and they start creating that great culture, and then it goes off the rails as they go, seeking the dollar instead of understanding where those dollars really come from. And it seems so obvious from the outside looking in, but when you're in the box, it's hard. How do we get the flashes of obvious to come in and be sustainable? So what the project starts is also going to be the, start where you mean to finish, right? Keep the project going.
Yeah. Well, again, all of this circles back to communication. It's about building that psychological safety in the workplace, which humor can help a lot with. You have that more relaxed atmosphere where people feel they can be themselves, so that people can have really rich, meaningful conversations around all of this. And then very often, when you have that psychological safety for people to speak up, that's when I found, when I facilitated meetings, when I facilitated brainstorming sessions, it is staggering how often what is your phrase? The obvious
BFOs.
The BFOs will pop up and people will go, my God, why are we only thinking of this now? Why hasn't somebody said this before? I mean, look at even Natasha's comment earlier about just the small things that people requested, right? It is so often the small things, the small little things that make a difference. And we so often don't make a link to those things that make a difference. The small language shifts, I mentioned earlier, you look at, it's a cliche example, but Pike's fish market, where they become famous. They became world famous when they decided to become world famous. That's a pretty inspiring sense of purpose too, by the way, because you get everyone rallied around a pretty cool sense of purpose, pretty cool goal. But one of their simple language shifts, right, is instead of providing good customer service, they changed that to, hey, makes everyone's day. What can you do to make someone's day? And isn't that a little more interesting sense of purpose? You're doing the same job, but if you truly think that way and embrace that idea, what am I going to do to make this person's day in a non-Clint Eastwood-like manner that will rock their day? That's a pretty cool sense of purpose. It may seem simplistic, it may seem small, but it's the small things that matter. I was doing a workshop to senior leaders on this point too, and I got talking about the power of, and I have all these examples. I have a ton of examples I run through really quickly of tiny gestures making a difference. And sometimes I get pushback on that because they don't believe it. I don't think that these small things could make a difference. So my response is,
that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Like, why don't they believe that?
I don't know. And I'm saying, do you want me to complicate things for you? Because I'd be happy to overcomplicate things for you and suggest you have to bring in a $200,000 consultant and create a 600-page report. This is good news. It's good news that it's the small things that make a difference, that it's the small things that can give us a sense of purpose. And I think people, I don't know if this is getting to the heart of your question, Lori, but I think sometimes people don't see it because they are just immersed. They're not outside their bubble. So they're not talking to their customers. They're not talking to people outside enough to get that outside perspective. And sometimes all it takes is a few outside perspectives where they go, oh my God, you're right. I think it's partly their training, how they've come up through the system. They've learned this from everyone in their organization. So this is the way we've always done things. And this is what we're focused on. And they do lose sight, I think, of the bigger picture. And they don't recognize that, spending this much time, this much money, this much energy here is going to save you a whole bunch of stress and conflict and time and money down the road. And it's going to make you more money down the road. And guess what? Even if it doesn't, it's the right thing to do. So why don't we
Why are
start
people
there?
so afraid to ask questions? You know, again, we're the choir. We're your 10% out here that are curious and open and doing this, but we are still encountering a vast majority of people that are frightened to ask the question. They're frightened to ask their clients, what do you need? What's going to make your life better? And they're equally frightened, if not more so, to ask their employees, what can I do to help you meet the needs of our customers and make them come back? Like that, again, it seems so obvious that why wouldn't you ask? And Lisa wrote about this, I think just this last week, of, stepping outside and looking at that. Why? That's my why. That's why I can never answer the why, is because I have so many why questions.
Yeah. It is. Yeah. It astounds me that so many people still don't get it. And I think one of the ways we can all help people to get it is by sharing stories, right? By sharing success stories. And I certainly know this in my talks. I have 2 keynotes coming up, 2 in person, my first in-persons tomorrow and Saturday. So I'm excited about that, to speak in front of people actually wearing pants. That's going to be very new for me after the last 2 years.
Don't put the imagination out there, Michael. We're assuming pants at this point.
I have pants on now. But now I lost my train of thought. What was I saying?
You're doing 2 keynotes, and we
Yeah.
talked about the little things and asking the questions.
Yes, about culture. I know, it's the importance of stories, right? And what I hear time and time again after my presentations is that what resonates with people, what helps people, I think, drive this home is stories and seeing real world examples, seeing example after example after example of teams or organizations or businesses that have made huge differences, huge strides, absolute turnovers in their culture by actually doing this stuff. And so when they see that it's possible, I think that inspires a lot of people. And that's what that helps a lot, I think, is to share stories, share success stories, and just keep pounding that why this matters. This matters for so many reasons. And here's all the reasons why it matters, right?
Well, let's take the opportunity. I mean, I'm not going to walk away from that segue. Unmute and share. What is a small item that you have used in your firm that had made a much bigger difference than you thought it would? Let's grow Michael's stories. He's doing 2 keynotes. You're going to want him talking about you. So let's share out. I know you've made incredible strides, Patty, creating a team within a team, and that doesn't happen overnight.
No, that has been a labor of love for 12 years. So yeah, I've done so many exercises with my team of paralegals, assistants, and junior lawyers, post-it exercises. What do we do? Why do we do it? What do we not do? And coming up with words. And we've come up with some concepts like, we're here to inspire our clients. We're here to, not just serve, but inspire. And we're here to help the entire community. We do commercial lending work, which is, many people will say is really boring, but what we're really doing is pumping money into the local economy. We're helping businesses hire people. We're helping those people, have their families and serve their families. So the impact of it really goes far. And trying to remember that every day is, it makes it feel like it's not just churning another file. We really are making an impact on a real warm body's life.
I love the way that you've aligned that to the trickle down effect. What you do may look like you're doing it up here in the tower, but consider the boots on the ground impact it's going to have. That is wonderful.
The downstream impacts, right, everyone? That's so important. I have one client, they have a purpose hallway. So on one side of the hallway, everybody celebrates their individual purpose that they derive from work, and what even they're doing with their money that they're earning from work, right? That's part of it. But then on the other side, They celebrate all of the downstream impacts, the impact they make on the charities they support, on the community, on the families. And there's a client in a manufacturing plant in the States where they make equipment, and they will take the people in the factories down to see the finished products with the clients using them. So they see the impact of their little work, because you don't see it, right? You don't see the finished product, but here's the difference you're making in people's lives. And that's what we have to do. So that's great, Patty. I love that. I got to get this in very quickly. I just saw this really inspiring keynote speaker yesterday online, Tariq. Does anyone know Tariq Fahad? I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. He is a Syrian refugee, lives in Nova Scotia. There's a movie made about him.
Oh, that's Peace Chocolate. I know them.
Yes, Chocolate by Peace.
I know them. They are in Antigonish, and they're right down the street from the hospital. What a small world.
Exactly. So a part of his whole philosophy is around exactly what we're talking about. What Patty was referencing is because they sell, but they don't just sell. He and his father, who started in the chocolate business, they never viewed it as selling chocolate. They viewed chocolate as the vehicle to building relationships, to building connections, to creating peace in the world, even to creating happiness in the world. So they consider themselves as sellers of happiness, not sellers of chocolate. And that may sound cheesy, but
such a community
yeah,
within the community of Antigonish. In case anybody doesn't know where that is, that's where St. FX University is, and go Bulldogs kind of thing. But it's they when they started, if you have a chance to see them, what a great story. What a small world.
yeah, what a cool guy. I mean, it's such an inspiring story.
Oh, very good. What's another small thing? Let's give them another story to share.
I just want to jump in here. I think one of the biggest things is changing your values definitions and changing them to a commitment. So, and I think too, like, I love Natasha's story about that whole innovation award and how it started out with those small things, because that's how you build that psychological safety. Right. So now, and again, having those stories and having them kind of drilled down into the organization. So if you think about construction industries that, I work with a lot, and blue collar industries, they always start a meeting with a safety moment. How about starting a meeting with a values moment? And that's how you can start to create the stories from your employees. And it starts to build that culture kind of from within, and that whole cascading down. But then also that commitment. So, innovation for Natasha's group, at the end of the day, it's like, what did I do to be innovative today to make us even just 1% better? And it's that almost like we're gauging our success at the end of the day by how we lived the values or how we created those stories.
Oh, fantastic. I like that idea of, aligning that safety moment to that. Oh, that's very, very good.
Yeah. Opening with a culture moment or closing with a culture moment to keep them. Yeah. It's about keeping the message alive, right? That's part of what we have to do here. We have to evangelize these messages and keep them alive.
And you can't say it and be done. You do have to live it. And so, as the converts, then our mission is to go out and share it. Right. Our mission is to go out and share how impactful it is, and how it does, for the accountants in the room, how it does impact the bottom line, right? How it does make that difference. We're to time, and I could talk about this for hours. I really could. So I hope that everybody will come back, including Michael. This is always the best time of the week for me. I want to thank you so much for coming in, Michael. You're always so patient and so willing to share. That's the wonderful thing about coming in here and having a conversation. Thanks again, Michael. This has been wonderful.
Oh, my pleasure, Lori. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for hanging out and sharing some of your ideas and just for being here. And yes, as Lori said, we need to be champions of this, right? Ambassadors for these messages, purpose. Absolutely. Ambassadors.
All right. Have a great day, everybody.